goal, Quishbilly Huddersfield Town! The most famous goal of Quishbilly's life.
Is this the moment for Lee Fowler? It is! Take your place in Division 2, Huddersfield Town.
And Steve Simonson's boots now. He's missed! Steve Simonson clears the frame of the goal and collapses in a heap of tears. Huddersfield Town are promoted.
Mustafa Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
Welcome to the warm-up Q&A. So the international break means there's no match to preview. So we're going to do something a little different here. We're going to delve into some questions. So joining me, your host / question master, Brady Frost, is a man who has all the answers. It's my co-host, Josh Phillips. Josh, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks, mate. If I'm the answer, what's the question?
Who's a great co-host? Look at me butting you up there.
Oh, no, I don't think that is the question, but I'll let you have that.
It's always good when, we start this and you're already, by the sounds of it, sick of me. So that's good.
Yeah, let's get on with it.
All right, don't laugh too much. Joining us later on is Elliot Jackson, who is the host of the Championship Chat podcast. He's also a football writer for Yorkshire Live, and he's a Grimsby Town reporter for Grimsby Town Live. So we'll be chatting to him later. He'll be joining us later in the pod. So stay tuned for that. But Josh, it's just you and me. We're both Huddersfield Town fans. We have been sent questions by Huddersfield Town fans. And I'm just going to go straight into them, mate. Are you ready for some of the questions the listeners have sent in?
More than ready.
Brilliant. Okay. So our first question is from Nick Mounfield. So I'll aim this one at you, Josh. We can both talk about this one. But why do you think Carlos Corberán is reluctant to play some of the fringe players? Holmes didn't get much of a look in, then he was able to hold down a regular place. Surely Rolanda Aarons and Josh Ruffles should be given more game time and help to keep the squad fresh. So why do you think Corberán is reluctant, mate?
It must be lack of trust. Pure and simple as that, really. I was surprised to see Hogg and Holmes play against Cardiff because they both picked up injuries against Peterborough, didn't they? And they both, in the end, did Holmes go off injured as well? I know Hogg did. I think Holmes came off at half time. So, yeah, I would have. That does suggest that he doesn't have much confidence in the people who aren't getting a game, because you've got two lads there who are, 60, 70% fit, and he's choosing to play him. All right, you've got the 2-week international break to recover after that. So maybe that was in his thinking that if they could get through that game, and then they've got 2 weeks to recover. But yeah, particularly Ruffles, he's only come on for a sub appearance, hasn't he? But he was brought in as backup. Toffolo, he's obviously got that position nailed down, and if he's fit, then it's going to be hard for him to drop him and play Ruffles. Turton he likes to bring on as a sort of like a defensive option. I'm not sure it works, but he does. I think he likes Turton using him. In terms of other players, Aarons, Odebeko, there's plenty of others, obviously. I can't think of them all right now, but yeah, it's a bit perplexing, and I'm sure those fringe players are probably feeling like a bit unloved at the moment. But also we don't know what goes on in training, do we? So maybe they're not doing it in training, but yeah, he just seemed very reluctant to rotate this year.
It was a bit of a similar thing last year, wasn't it? Obviously, where he played, the same lineup, 7 games in a row, and that's kind of what led to all our injuries. Is there anyone in there that you think should be pushing for a start? I think you're spot on in terms of trust. He obviously doesn't trust players, or he doesn't feel they've got up to level of speed. I think Ruffles is an interesting one because I would argue, I know Ollie Turton's one of your favourite players, mate, but I would argue like Ruffles is probably closer to Toffolo than Turton is to Pippa in terms of ability. So I think it's interesting that we've not really seen him that much, particularly.
I think the reason for that is sort of what I just touched on in the fact that Ruffles is more of like an attacking fullback, and if we're chasing a game, Toffolo attacks anyway. So you wouldn't really be adding anything to the team by bringing Ruffles on for Toffolo because they're pretty similar. Whereas Turton coming on in place of Thomas is much more of a difference, I'd say, in terms of the type of play you're bringing on. You're actually making a change to the dynamic of the team, making them more defensively solid, allegedly. So, yeah, I think that's why Ruffles is not getting as much of a look in. I don't think it's because he doesn't rate him as much as Turton, just more different players for different needs.
Oh, he got in an office quote there at the end as well. Look at, you can't see this, but you'll see his smug little face as he drinks a sip of beer. Yeah, interesting. Who do you think is, well, I suppose this is one of the, leads on nicely to one of our other questions. So this is from a Twitter user called Folding Stuff. There seems to be a lot of exciting players on the fringes of the first team. Who do you think will be next to break into the team? Do you expect anyone else to go out on loan?
I do like Keane Harrott, but I don't know how close he is to the first team. Probably from what I'm hearing, or from what we all hear, to be honest, he's not quite ready for that yet. So I think maybe a loan for him. But I think for me, Danny Grant, if he can stay fit, he looks dangerous from what I've seen. So he's the one that I want to see make his debut next. Well, league debut. I don't know if he's played actually in any other games, but yeah, I think he's the one who we could see in the second half of the season and maybe be a breakthrough player. Who else? Karoma's not been starting. I know he's part of the first team setup anyway, but I think if Holmes is injured, then I'd like to see Karoma get back in the side. Aarons is an interesting one, isn't it? Stop-start season last season, and then injury start of this one, but he's not been used much since he's come back from injury. So you'd have to expect that he will be. And then another one, a player I really like, Aaron Rowe. It's a shame he got injured at the start of this season because I think, as it's turned out, Thomas has been brilliant as a right wing back. But I think if you went back to the start of the season, it would have been close between Rowe and Thomas for that position, with Pippa being injured. He's a player with a lot of development room, I'd say. He's got a good foundation. He's very good on the ball, tricky customer. Got a shot on him, as we saw that goal he scored against Plymouth. And he also played a bit at the end of last season. He scored that goal at Forest as well. So yeah, for me, Aaron Rowe and Danny Grant, I think they could add a bit of extra sort of enthusiasm and trickery into the team for the second half of the season. And then, as I said, Keane Harrott is another player that I'm interested to keep an eye on. Probably one for next season.
Yeah, I was going to say a similar answer. Look at us always agreeing, but Danny Grant's the one that's interesting for me. I think I did a piece on the site with a Bohemians fan when we signed him, and I think they were really excited to see what he can do in the Championship. He has played Europa League games, so he's the one I'm excited about. He's had an awful time since he's joined the club. Obviously, he had that nasty injury, and I think he's had COVID as well. And he's just been really unfortunate. He was actually meant. You touched on the Plymouth game when you talked about Aaron Rowe. I think he was actually meant to play that match, and they put him. They actually put him up for the pre-match interview, and then obviously he got that nasty injury, and we've not really seen him since. So. Cosy was actually at the B team game where I think if you follow our Twitter account, you would have seen the picture of him coming on. So that's positive. I think One I'm excited about, Josh, I think we actually picked him at the start of the season as kind of one to break through is John Russell. So the former Chelsea player who played for Accrington Stanley on loan in League One last
season.
Oh.
Who were they?
Exactly. So that really made me jump, mate.
Sorry.
That really no, it really made me jump. I think because I was looking away.
So you spent watching soccer, I am. Sorry.
Oh no, yeah. Anyway. John Russell. It's been interesting how they're playing him in the B team as well, because he's actually played on the left, so where Koroma would play. He's quite a tall player, but I think they played him in quite a few positions as well. And I think David Hartrick touched on it, but we've obviously seen how Phil Billing has been doing at Bournemouth, turned into a number 10, and John Russell's good with the ball at his feet, and he's a similar kind of stature in terms of height. So I wonder, and I think that's kind of what, as the rumours I've heard, they're kind of planning him as maybe number 10. And I think that's the one that excites me, because I do think midfield's not an issue, but we know what Hogg's like with his injuries. He always has a niggle. Vallejo's been injured. And I think you know what you're going to get from Lewis O'Brien. I don't need to tell you, Josh, because I know you love him so much. I mean, who doesn't? But I think Russell could offer us a different option. And I think I look at midfield and I do think we could do a bit more from an attacking sense. You know, we've been amazing at set pieces, but we're still not, apart from the Cardiff game, we've not consistently created a lot of chances from open play. And I think that's the one that excites me. Danny Grant and John Russell for me. So Elliot's just joined us. So Elliot is the host of the Championship Chat podcast. Obviously, you're a football writer for Yorkshire Live, and you're the Grimsby Town reporter as well at Grimsby Town Live. How are you, Elliot?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on, mate. So we actually got a question through, an anonymous question directed at you. So it was, don't worry, it's not bad. As someone who doesn't support Town, what have you made of Huddersfield this season?
Yeah, so I would say above expectations, certainly, from what I've seen. I covered a fair bit of Huddersfield in pre-season, in particular with our regular reporter Stephen Chickenoff onto comment. So I was drafted in on Town quite extensively throughout pre-season. And I thought the summer business was steady without being spectacular, which I think echoed a lot of what the fan base would have said themselves going into the pre-season. And if I'm honest, I thought anything above 22nd was probably going to be a decent season. I didn't expect them to do as well as they have. They've still got some of the misgivings that I think will still prevent them being certainly a top 10 team in terms of at the top end of the pitch, which is what I thought before the season. I'm not surprised in the slightest by Sorba Thomas, because he was absolutely tearing it up in pre-season. And the only thing I'm surprised of is that he's actually had the opportunity, because I think had it not been for the COVID cases at Derby, I don't think he'd have played. I think it would have been 4-3-3 as it was throughout the whole of pre-season, and Dwayne Holmes would have played on the right wing. So the fact that obviously they had to change shape to 3-5-2 and Sorba got his chance at left wing back was a bit of fortune that's obviously benefited Town and benefited him massively. So I've been impressed. They've exceeded my expectations from pre-season, definitely, and it's nice to see that. I think if you took engaged opinion in the summer, was it the right decision to get rid of Danny Cowley for Carlos Corberán? I think you'd have had a larger proportion say we've not seen enough to justify that decision at the summer point, albeit there was obviously a lot of extenuating circumstances last season against Carlos in terms of the injuries, playing behind closed doors, all those sort of things. If you took a poll now, I think we've seen a lot more fruit from their labour, if you like, and what's been done behind the scenes to justify what was at the time quite a risky appointment, probably, it's fair to say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think we've seen a lot more from Corberán, and I think that's probably because of the players, like you touched on. I think the squad's improved massively, but it's good to hear. I think we've had rival fans on, and I think they've been pleasantly surprised. So I think it's good in a good way, like you say, when maybe hopes are a bit low. I think you can always exceed expectations, can't you? So
it's nicer for it to be that way around.
Yeah, definitely. Let's just hope we don't get the second half slide again. So we'll see. So Josh, I'm going to come to you. I know you're trying to hide away from this question that I'm going to ask you, but we've got an anonymous one, another one coming. Interested to get your thoughts on this, Elliot. I might change it slightly for you, but Josh, how concerned are you that Harry Toffolo hasn't signed a new deal yet? And do we expect prospects like Toffolo, O'Brien and Sorba to be sold, especially with the recent news about Phil's business struggles?
Well, when does Toffolo's contract expire? Is it end of this season?
End of season, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, if that's not done by January, then that's a concern. Yeah, because obviously probably get sold in January. They sign a new one. One of the best left backs in the league, I'd say. So we need to get him tied down if we can. O'Brien probably going to go at some point, isn't he? Let's be honest. He signed a new contract, which is great, but that just all it does really is ensures that we get a decent fee for him when he does go. Thomas, I think he won't go in January. I don't think. If he carries on like he is doing, I think the clubs have noticed him. I'd say high clubs have noticed him, but it's probably too early to make sort of judgment on whether he gets signed or not. He needs to do it over a longer period. So I think Thomas is safe till the summer. And if he does get sold in the summer, that means he will have had a brilliant second half of the season. So it means we get a good fee for him and contribute assists and goals. O'Brien, similar. It does depend, but also depends if Leeds stay up. If Leeds stay up and they decide to go back in for him, he could be one that leaves next summer. Hopefully not. But yeah, Toffolo, let's see what happens. I'd like to keep him, really would. If he doesn't sign a new deal in time for January, could be off.
And Elliot, what's kind of the because obviously you cover the Championship. Toffolo's a key player to town, but is that kind of seen, across the Championship? Is he seen as a good player and clubs would be interested in him?
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely, I would list him in sort of maybe the top 5 left backs in the division. To be honest, I've been really impressed with him. I was impressed with him at Lincoln before he moved to Huddersfield, and when I've seen him live and when I've seen him through our coverage and on the TV, I've been really impressed. And I would be a little bit concerned that his contract's up and he hasn't signed a new deal by now if I was Huddersfield, just because I think you've seen with the Lewis O'Brien deal that clearly there's an understanding from the club that they're not deluded. They know that, for example, with O'Brien, he will eventually be a Premier League player. I'm not sure that will be Leeds, actually, if I'm honest. I think that a lot of Leeds' interest in the summer was probably circumstantial of where they were in the market, the amount they wanted to spend that summer, and the players probably available. I'm not sure they were 100% sold that they will definitely come back next summer, but I do think someone will, whether that's a Newcastle or a Norwich as well. They were linked. Well, it won't be Newcastle probably now, but they were linked previously as well. So again, O'Brien interest wouldn't surprise me, but clearly the club are selling themselves as a within relative terms a stepping stone for players. So if Toffolo's not signed a deal under those circumstances, and I'm not privy to what goes on behind in the boardroom, but that would concern me a little bit, because if I was a Championship team, maybe either at the top end or a team that gets promoted in the summer and wants cover at left back and someone that can genuinely challenge and play week in, week out, I think, for a newly promoted side. You think of a Norwich, for example, if Norwich came down or a Norwich-esque type of club went up, probably not Fulham because they've got Anthony Robinson and Joe Bryan, but if West Brom went up, for example, and they want another wing back to complement Connor Townsend, I would think he would be a really, really good pickup regardless. And then the fact he would be a free transfer, I would say that makes him probably more vulnerable than the other two to not be at town at the start of next season.
That'll be a shame as well, because from a fan's point of view, he really gets involved with fans and the club. He seems like a really nice bloke to have around the place, and obviously he's got his little thing with Lewis O'Brien, so can't leave each other, can they? Might have to go to the same club if one leaves.
Yeah, it would be. As you say, I would agree with that. I do think that there's a good chance he'll still sign a deal. Absolutely. I don't know if talks have taken place or what. I think he's the type that if he can see progression, he probably would give them more time. It depends what offers are on the table ultimately, and it'll be a football decision as much as a business and an emotional one.
No, good point. But, obviously, town players always stay at Huddersfield. They love Huddersfield just as much as Josh and I do. So I don't think we need to worry about it. So we'll move on. So we got a question from James Whitaker, who has been on this podcast before. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but is Carlos making the same mistakes again by not resting players in the red zone? Do you think another injury crisis could kibosh another good season? Elliot, I'll come to you first.
I can see the concerns, particularly when you look at the fact that Holmes and Hogg both went off in midweek, and then you would expect if someone goes off injured on the Wednesday night, unless it's an impact injury rather than a muscle injury, that they won't play the following weekend. Both of them look to be more muscular problems rather than impact injuries from a tackle. So for them to start again at the weekend and then both have to come off, you're also hamstringing yourself. I mean, you look at the Cardiff game in particular, that's a game, I mean, Town should have won. They were 1-0 up and missed 2 sitters, hit the post with one of them through Danny Ward. So you think if they'd had those extra couple of subs that they've lost from the substitutes with the injuries, maybe they could have freshened things up. Now, that's just playing devil's advocate. Of course, we don't know what would have happened, but it's a fair comment, I think, a fair analysis that that could be an impact. And I think it also reflects on, clearly, Corberan feels that he is dependent on a couple of key players rather than trusting the whole squad, which, when Alex Vallejo's come in, I think he's done all right. So that surprised me a little bit that he wouldn't be willing to rest him. And we have seen he's taken, for example, risks with the fact that Josh Cromer's not played a lot in the last few weeks, when you would have said at the start of pre-season he would be probably, along with O'Brien, number 1 on the team sheet. So I do think maybe that is a potential weakness in his skill set, because we saw it obviously so badly last season. And there is an element of luck that goes into these things, but when it's the second time, you have to start looking at patterns and what could potentially Huddersfield do better as a coaching staff, as a medical department, and also as with a bit of luck on the injury front. So I think I wouldn't be too concerned about it being a risk, but I do think there is elements that suggest that Corberan probably doesn't trust the bulk of his squad as much as he could with certain players, albeit he didn't have the same depth last season, to be fair, as he does now. So maybe he's just learning and adapting that he has got a better group of players, certainly depth-wise this season. There's no doubt about that with the summer recruitment. I mean, last season when Pippa was out or Toffolo was out, they got Aaron Rowe playing at left wing back. They, compared to now, they've got 2 fullbacks in each position, for example. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that one. But I think this week has shown that clearly there are still lessons to be learned in that department.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, to be honest, as a fan, I am slightly concerned because although I think we've made another good start to the season we did last season, I think it's been a lot clearer this start compared to the start in the previous campaign. It's been a lot better. I think you can see a lot of improvement. But my concern is Corberan, from what we've seen so far, it seems to be kind of a manager of extremes. So they seem to go, as we saw last season, it's either a horrendous run or he plays, really well. And I just think with a team like Huddersfield, it might be quite boring, but I do think given the chaos that's happened for the club for the last couple of years, we do kind of need stability. That's not me saying like Corberan out or anything, but I do think we are a couple of injuries away from maybe it not being as bad as last season, but we're going to have a bad run at some point. And I think, to be completely honest, I'm a little bit concerned given what happened last season, even though we do have a better squad, if we would get ourselves out of that, because I think there seems to be a lot of momentum, particularly we were talking about it earlier, but after a disappointing performance against Bournemouth last season when we lost 5-0 and he played like a completely second string squad. He then played the same team for 7 games. He seems to, I think, is it 4 or 5 games, Josh, he's played the same team in a row?
Yeah, something like that. I know we touched on it earlier, the Hogg and Holmes thing, playing at Cardiff. The Hogg one I kind of understand more because Vallejo wasn't available, was he?
No, he's still nursing a bit of an injury, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's my bad then. Apologies on that.
That's all right. Yeah, so that one I kind of understand because Hogg is key to the team and there's no like-for-like replacement. Scott High, I've said before, I like him, but he's a very different kind of player to Jonathan Hogg. And if you're going away to Cardiff, which is, quite a physical game, I can understand wanting to give Hogg a go. Holmes one I don't really get because you've got Karoma sat on the bench. So I think that was a bit of a nonsense decision, really. But yeah, there are some similarities to last season. They're not rotating players, they're throwing away leads. So that they're constants from the last campaign. But I do think we've seen a lot of change from Carlos in his approach from last season. We seem a lot more solid as a team. So I think it'd be unfair to say he doesn't learn from his mistakes at all, because he clearly does, but maybe he's got more learning to do for next season. Hopefully it's with us. If he carries on like this, it'll be with us. But in his longer career, he's got more learning to do.
Yeah, no, good point. Bit of debate. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but just a little concerned. But maybe that says a lot about me. We've got a question from Joe Scott. So Joe has also been on the podcast before. This is what happens when you're in the pod family. People just want to send you questions all the time. Always a favourite one. Talking about transfers. So should Town be looking to sign a striker in January? Elliot, what do you think is a kind of neutral perspective?
I think it's the obvious weakness in the squad. I've said that in pre-season. I said that in pre-season, apart from perhaps a creative midfielder, but then Daniel Sinani came in, who I think's done all right in flashes. I think the weekend was a really big example of where Huddersfield win that game if they have a better striker on the pitch, who takes the chance to make it 2-0 in either of those scenarios that they missed. So yeah, I think it is, but again, it depends on availability, on budget. Is there someone that can get in on loan that will be better than what they've already got? I don't sense that they will do anything unless they think it's a clear upgrade. And I don't think there's buckets of funds necessarily to spend either. So I think it would be a loan, perhaps looking at maybe one of the Premier League strikers, someone that's out of favour. For some reason, Adam Eder springs to mind. I don't know why. I've just completely made that up. There's no substance in that, but someone like that, perhaps who's sort of on the periphery, who's got a little bit of championship experience. I think he would be someone different as well to what they've got. It's someone who could stretch the pitch a little bit more than perhaps Danny Ward or Fraser Campbell, and Jordan Rhodes obviously still on the sidelines at the minute. So I think if they can, it definitely should be the area they're looking at. I think it's the weakest part of the squad for me, and it's the part that will potentially propel them into a top 10 team. When you look at some of the teams in around Huddersfield that are sort of in that very condensed pack that are trying to establish themselves in the top half, like Blackpool, for example, they've got Jerry Yates, Medine, Shane Lavery, for example. I would say all three of those, certainly Yates and Lavery would start for Huddersfield, for example, and I'm not sure how many of the central strikers would start for other teams in that batch from Huddersfield. There are other players in other areas, and certainly in wide areas, that definitely would. So, but for that sort of reason, I think that would be the obvious area that I would suggest Huddersfield would need to strengthen the most. Nice. But it's obviously the one that costs the most as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we're going to do an exclusive that Elliot Jackson says Adam Eder's going to move to Huddersfield in January.
There's your headline.
Yeah, there we go. That's why we invited you on, mate, to get that. Josh, what about yourself? I think with Danny Ward, I think he's been a lot better this season, mainly because he's not been injured for most of it. Still not maybe as prolific as people would want. Obviously, me and you both like Fraser Campbell in terms of a almost like defensive forward, hassling and harrying people. But do you think Town should be looking at a striker? Obviously, we've got Rhodes to come back, and we've got Meepo, who seems to be nowhere apart from B team.
Yeah, well, I think we do need a striker, yeah, but I think, Meepo's going to end his loan in January, more than likely. It's got a break-off period in January. If either party's not happy with it, and he won't be happy with it because he's not been playing. So that leaves us with Ward, Campbell, and Rhodes. If Rhodes comes back to fitness. So I'm just thinking how the club will be thinking about it. We play one up front most of the time. So will they be thinking three's enough to go into one? Potentially. I think it'll also depend where we are in the table when it comes to January. But you've got Campbell and Rhodes, who are both bench options of different sorts. Campbell's someone that's going to come on, and if we're defending the lead, you'd probably bring him on. Rhodes, you'd probably bring on if we're trying to get a goal. And then you've got Ward as your starting striker. So I would want another striker in, personally. But if the club sees it that way, I think there'll be a bit of uproar from the fans if we won't sign a striker, if Meepo goes back to West Ham. So I think they will bring one in, but it'll be interesting to see whether it's someone they're going to bring in to start or just someone like a Meepo sort of like-for-like replacement, a young player on loan who will be sort of on the edge of the squad. So yeah, I think they will bring one in, but it will depend on a number of factors: the Rhodes injury status, where we are in the league, and also the budget as to whether the caliber of the striker we do bring in.
Yeah. I'm gonna chuck in a question because I'm a question master. Because you're a Wednesday fan, Elliot, I think it's a bit of an interesting one. Obviously, Rhodes has been injured, but I think we've been trying to work out how we kind of see him. He actually did start the game against Derby, but I think most people kind of see him as that 15, 20-minute striker to maybe put a chance. Do you think it's obviously you saw him at Wednesday? I know he didn't have the best time, but can you see Rhodes doing that kind of role at Town?
I think that he's got the potential. I really liked Jordan Rhodes, and I have to say I was very excited when he signed. He was really not very good for Sheffield Wednesday. I would put that. So I'm trying not to be biased or blind by that. If I was a team depending on goals from Jordan Rhodes, I would be concerned. I know his record's amazing, but you are now looking beyond 4 years since he's hit double figures. Really, he didn't hit double figures once at Hillsborough. Didn't really play that much for Norwich when he went on loan there. He was very much the supporting cast for Timu Pukki. So I think that is the best you're going to get out of him. I don't think that Jordan Rhodes is going to make an abundance of difference to whether Huddersfield Town finish 10th or 15th, if I'm being brutally honest. That's just from what I see. I think Danny Ward's a better player. I quite like Danny Ward. I just think that he's been injured for that long and that amount of time that he now doesn't probably have that cutting edge that he once had. I saw him a lot play at Rotherham, and I was really impressed with him at Rotherham, and I thought he was good enough to play for regularly and be a starting striker, but he's just been injured so much for Huddersfield. And I think that if this was 2 years ago, perhaps I would be a lot more confident that Danny Ward could hit, 15, 20 goals. But he's just, when you're out for that period of time, you're just not quite the same player. So I do think for me, Jordan Rhodes will always be a decent option off the bench ultimately, and he's not. He's on a 3-year deal. Town clearly have done that so they can spread out the cost of his wages. I think his time in the Championship is now at the point where he is someone that will have to come off and make an impact in 15, 20 minutes. Otherwise, I don't think he's that effective. He's just not the player he used to be. And that saddens me because he has been obviously such a great player in the Championship for Huddersfield when they were in League One, of course. I remember when he netted 4 at Hillsborough, for example. He was such a great player, and he was someone I always admired from afar before he came to Hillsborough. But he just lost that yard of it wasn't rapid anyway, but he still had that enough of a burst over 5 yards where he could beat a defender. And I've noticed, particularly watching him, he doesn't have a lot more to his game other than scoring goals. You have strikers that, in particular, like Fraser Campbell, you've just touched on. You've got his work rate and his pressing intensity, even if he's not scoring goals. With Rhodes, he's kind of scoring, or he's not really impacting play that much. He doesn't hold the ball up brilliantly. He's not someone who runs the channels fantastically. He's not particularly quick to stretch the defence either. So I think that has to be the role that he plays for a Championship team, unless out of somewhere he pulls back some sort of form that we've not seen, unfortunately, for 3 or 4 years.
He's never had anything apart from scoring goals, but in my opinion. And for him to score goals again, I think he's got to play every week. So it's probably going to be
I also think it's really important that he plays with a striker. I don't think he's a great solo striker, and obviously that's what Town predominantly play with, unless they play 3-5-2. When he was at his best was with Rudy Gestede. When he was at his best at Sheffield Wednesday, probably when he was up front with Stephen Fletcher. Again, people who are going to occupy defenders, lead the line, and take that responsibility almost off Rhodes that you can just focus on putting the ball in the net. If you're playing one up front, that you've got to be a multifaceted striker that can do lots of different things, and Rhodes just isn't that, and that's not how you're going to get the best from him
but I don't think he's either done enough recently to justify that a team should be built around him at this stage in his career.
Yeah, well, going back even further, when Tam fans will know Lee Novak and Rhodes, when they first joined, Novak was doing all the dog work, and then Rhodes was doing the goal scoring. He's never been able to play up front on his own, which there was one time when we had Benicofobia on loan and we were playing a system which had one striker, and everyone was like, why is Rhodes on the bench? Well, it's because he couldn't play up front on his own. He never has been able to. So I can't see that changing now. But if you are going to play two up front, then I think we do need to bring in another striker, and if it's going to be someone to play with Rhodes, and it's got to be, like you say, someone that's more of a focal point, a bit more physical up there. So see what happens.
I think it's interesting though, because the Millwall game, obviously, where we Hogg gets the winner, Corberan did actually bring two strikers on. We did kind of go to the Mike Bassett 4-4-2. So I wonder, maybe there is a role for Rhodes if he is on someone like Campbell, potentially. It might not work for every game, but, like you talk about with Novak would do all the hard work for him. Well, Campbell can do that. Campbell's not really been prolific at Town, not that he was brought in to be that particularly, but, maybe that could work. But like you say, it's, he needs to be playing games, and this back injury doesn't sound particularly great. So I don't know when we'll see him, to be honest.
I guess the harsh reality is we've got three strikers who are all past the best.
I would
get
agree
away
with that.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but it's not been a cheery pod. Maybe we should move on from Rhodes. Not that this is particularly any going to lighten the mood anymore. So this was an anonymous question. Have you made any approaches to the club for a representative like Mark Devlin to feature on the pod? So I can probably take this. So we've had people from the club on in the past. So we've had the market manager and Luke Cowan from the retail store. They've come on and talked to us about the process with the shirts, which was a pod I really enjoyed, and I'd recommend people go back and give that a listen. We had Sean Jarvis on, obviously, when he was at the club and when he was leaving. I'm trying to think. We've also had, Peeper. Me and Josh and Matt did that. That was good fun, wasn't it? Seemed to enjoy it. He was laughing a lot. Maybe just at us, not with us. But anyway, we've spoken about it before. Obviously, we've had Phil Hodgkinson on previously. I thought I'd mention Phil because there's quite a few questions we have about him. In my opinion, like Phil did come on, and I think that was really good and really eye-opening. But I think. I know the circumstances have changed, but I almost feel like I wouldn't want to necessarily have Phil on again. I know, given other situations, but I don't really think it's best for him. That sounds like there's a lot of work behind the scenes, and I don't know about you, Josh. I think like as a fan, I kind of want them to get on with it. I've enjoyed. I think it was a really good touch, and you don't see that from a lot of football chairmen coming on a fan podcast. But I think it's kind of not the time. If Mark Devlin did want to come on this pod, I'll do it as an open call. We'd chat to him, but I don't know if it's necessarily right, in my opinion. What do you think on that, Josh?
For Phil to come on the podcast now,
or Mark Devlin, I think was the question.
I think Devlin. I've seen Mark Devlin go on the Huddersfield Town Family Facebook page. One came across pretty well. I'd say it's not really Phil's place. Obviously, when he came in, he was following Dean Hoyle, who was someone who was very a good speaker with the fans, sort of like fans forums, whether live or on a chat like this. So I think there was a bit of pressure on him to sort of replicate that. But really, how many football chairmen are going on a fan podcast? Not many.
No.
So I don't think he should if he doesn't want to. I'm absolutely fine with that. Devlin, in his role as chief exec, it's probably more within his remit to do it every now and then, and I think he seems to do that. The monthly updates, I think maybe just a bit of lip service because the fans have asked for more communication. It's sort of it's easy to write stuff down, isn't it? Because you can be very picky about what you include and how you word it. It's different to appearing on a chat like this. So, yeah, I think Matt Devlin should, I'm sure if we asked him, he'd be open to coming on. So I'd say, that's potentially someone we could get on in future.
Yeah, I think this sounds like I'm going to kiss the arse of the club, but whenever we have approached the club for stuff, they've been quite supportive, and I think, not that we speak to other fans when we're doing the preview episodes, it's not always the same. So I think you're right though. Like Dean was very open with supporters, and Phil I think has tried to be, and maybe it's not his bag, but I don't know, Elliot, if you, not that I'm going to ask you on the kind of technical, but I don't know if you feel that, like, I don't know if it's the same for other clubs with Championship clubs, they're not as open with chairman.
I think from what I've seen, I think he's a pretty good example, to be honest. I think he gives the media a lot more time than most chairmen would, most owners would, particularly after the transfer window, for example. I know that Stephen and BBC Radio Leeds had a good chat with him and a good sit down with him, which you don't do. And from my experience, I think Huddersfield are one of the better clubs to deal with, to be honest, in terms of how they are with us as the media. When I've stepped in, the transparency's there. They will try and work with you, which is something you cannot say for every club by any means. Grimsby are very good with me, but I know we have difficulties with Hull, for example, with the Alams. I mean, the whole Daily Mail's banned for a start. Never mind actually, trying to build a relationship and getting heads up on transfers and steers and things like that, which Huddersfield are really good at. So I think Huddersfield, from a neutral coming in, and obviously you guys will pick up on things that I won't matter to me and I won't appreciate, for example, that might not paint the club in such a great light. But from a media perspective, they're one of the better clubs I've dealt with, and I don't see that many chairmen coming out to give the level of detail and the time that Hodgkinson has with the media in particular, and the fact that he's been on your podcast as well is something that I couldn't particularly point to lots of people doing. So for me, I would say they're a really good example of how you find that line between, obviously they've got to have their own interests and look after Huddersfield Town, but equally respecting the fans, not just paying them lip service with easy answers. Like, for example, giving the amount of detail they gave him with O'Brien's answers on about the interest from Leeds and things like that. Even whilst it was ongoing, they put that club statement out with the update, didn't they? Confirm there was a couple of bids, and then to go in more detail after the window had shut. I just think it's a very good way of operating for me, both as a journalist and if it was my club.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I would say maybe Phil revealed a little bit too much in BBC Radio Leeds interview, but like you say, I think it's good that we have that. So I've got a question from Dean Smith, who's probably not that Dean Smith, but I don't know if he likes Stephen Jones, but we'll see.
Any jobs going, lads?
Yeah. So this is a bit of an interesting one. I've seen quite a lot of Town fans taking pleasure in Phil Hodgkinson's business imploding. Has he really done such a bad job? Have we really become the kind of club that attacks people when they're down? Phil deserves praise for what he's achieved, not abuse. Josh, what do you think? Because I think it's, for me, when Phil came in, I think he'd admit this himself. He made a few mistakes. I think he had, he has a bit of a personality. You don't always get that from a chairman, but he's very talkative. And like you said, Elliot, he likes to speak to the media. But do you think he's done a bad job, Josh? Obviously, we'll see what happens. But
I'll answer your question in two parts.
Okay.
The first part is about some fans' reaction to his business going under. I think for some people it was sort of Christmas come early. People who like to have a bash at Phil, like they're obsessed with it and they're absolutely pathetic. That's my first answer. Second answer is, how do I think he's done as a chairman? I think he made quite a few mistakes when he first came in. Tried to be a bit too much like Dean. He maybe should have done it a bit more his own way. But you can't argue with what he's done. He's come in, he's taken over a squad which was absolute shambles. A lot of players and a lot of money. Didn't want to be there. And he's got us to a position where, all right, it's not even halfway through the season yet, but we look like, at least a mid-table team. And it's taken a bit longer to get there than maybe we wanted, but I think the situation was worse than what he thought it was. So that's why it's taken longer. And we've had COVID as well, which, okay, every club's had COVID, but not every club has had a chairman whose business has gone under because of COVID. So I think he's done a decent job. And, we're not sure how it's going to play out with the current situation. But if he has to step down, then I think he can be proud of what he's done in his time with the club, and I think we're in a better position than when he took it over. He's not done everything right. A lot, been well publicised the mistakes that he's made, but I think overall he's done a good job.
Oh bloody hell, Josh! Don't sit on the fence, mate. No, I think it's a good point. I think you're spot on. You look at this squad; it's a much more competitive squad. I think what was Stephen Chicken saying? Town's wage turnover ratio is 56%, when the average one in the Championship's 120. And so, we are a well-run club, I would say. I know we had a lot of frees and when we added to the squad, and I'll be the first to admit, when you see a lot of free signings, it's not always the most exciting or the sexy signings. I mean, Tom Lee's on paper wasn't a sexy signing, but he's been amazing for Town. I'd agree. I think it's difficult. I suppose that would be a podcast where we talk about it for 2 hours, but I think it's difficult to know what you want from an owner or chairman. For a lot of fans, I'm not saying this, but people just want a bit similar to a Newcastle, someone who comes in and just pumps loads of money and you can be linked to all these clubs. Whereas I think particularly in the Championship, you're not always going to get that. And I don't think Huddersfield, if I'm being completely honest, unless they have another amazing 10 years, are ever going to be that club that is going to attract such large investments. So, I don't know. Elliot, from your perspective, because obviously you've covered Town a bit, and you mentioned Phil's easy to deal with. Do you think, from some of the reporting, do you think he's done a good job compared to maybe some other chairmen in the league?
I think so. I think looking at it purely from a football perspective, as Josh has just well broken down there, just look where they were. Look at the state of the squad. They've got rid of all the bad apples, for want of a better phrase, and they've brought in some very acute signings that didn't look that sexy is the right word. They weren't sexy, particularly recruits, from a fan's perspective. But as the season's progressed, you've seen how important just having more depth, particularly in fullback areas and things like that, were. I think with the right recruitment and running a club well, it can take you a lot further in the Championship than probably other leagues. I think of, not now, but maybe 2 or 3 years ago, looking at Preston, who were punching above their weight without spending mega money. Blackpool, obviously, good recruitment as well, as taking them up from League One and pushing the top half of the Championship. So I do think there's a lot of examples where you can get, but there is a ceiling with that, and that's where then I think fans would want to see Huddersfield kick on. Now they've got rid of the bad apples. Let's have a season of sustainability and solidarity. Finish 13th or whatever after a good start, which is better than I predicted, or I think most fans would have predicted. And then it's how can you break that top 10 gap, and then the top 6 gap potentially, if you want to see the club continue to move forward. I mean, to break into that top 10 with the money that's there, you either need an exceptional coach, which Carlos Corberan has proven he's capable of clearly turning and implementing a style. Is he got another level to get them into the top 10 through his coaching, or a little bit more investment in the playing squad? Now, obviously, everyone's still reacting to COVID. Phil's obviously had a difficult couple of weeks with his personal businesses. So I think that, if Huddersfield, as long as they're not stagnating, I think, as you've said earlier, with the amount of turmoil they've had over the last 5 years, a couple of seasons of competing in and around the top half would be okay. But then it's how do they break that barrier to get top 10, top 6? And I think that comes, as I say, from either better, more expensive recruitment ultimately, and very good recruitment, probably shopping in a window, probably one above them without being at the top of the Championship. There's probably 3 tiers. They've probably been shopping in the sort of bottom end to bulk out the squad and fill out with the right sort of, personnel rather than quality of player, getting the right characters in the dressing room. Can they get the top end of that sort of middle bracket of players to push them into a team that could compete for the top 10, top 6 in the next couple of years? Or can Carlos do something like Bielsa did, for example, where he's got a team that was, 14th, and he's managed to elevate the level of those players so high? That remains to be seen. That's a massive ask. And I think that's sort of the challenges. But I think he's done a good job of weeding out the apples. I mean, we've seen the amount of clubs that have slid all the way out Look at the state derby we're in, for example. Sheffield Wednesday got points deductions because they couldn't sustain the levels of spending and didn't know how to offload players. I think Huddersfield have done the right thing. I mean, you look at, like, for example, the Bacuna and the Mbenza stuff in the summer where they've triggered the extra deal. All right, the Mbenza one didn't work out, but there was interest, so you can see why they did that. But they've ended up getting a fee for Bacuna, which they wouldn't. So, they could have had them sat on the books or lost them for free. So things like that, I do think they've done a better job than some would. And certainly we've seen plenty of examples of how it can go wrong when you are coming off Premier League wages and revenue, and you're not a club that traditionally would be at that level. Adapting to that can be difficult. And I think they've done a relatively good job of balancing the books and the squad.
No, I'd agree. So we've got quite a few questions about Phil. So I think it'd be good to maybe see how the weeks and months go and come back to this. We'll do another Q&A because I think that'd be interesting. So I think we're going to wrap up with this question. It's from Tom Bradshaw. I don't know if you saw this one, Josh, when it was coming through. But it's one for both of you. I'll ask Elliot which one he'd prefer to answer. So Tom has tweeted us saying, "What's Brady's favourite pizza and why? And can Josh describe his ideal Sunday?" So Josh, do you want to describe your ideal Sunday first?
Ideal Sunday. I'm normally hungover, so
Okay.
I'm not having a hangover for a start. Yeah. 11-a-side football in the morning. Yeah. And then go to the pub, a couple of good matches on TV. And then actually they have like a poker night at the pub near me. So probably after a few drinks, head down there, play a bit of poker, win a bit of money, get a bit of food on the way home. Job's a good one.
Oh God, you're such a big bloody bloke, aren't you, mate? Look at that.
Why? What's yours?
My favourite pizza. So it's interesting, right? This could be a pod in itself, but I think if I'm doing takeaway pizza, like I'm talking, we've had a couple of drinks, it's just takeaway pizza. I think you can't really go wrong with pepperoni. I think that's
it's a safe option, isn't it? It's like they're bringing Ollie Turton on after 70 minutes.
Exactly. It's going to do a job. That analogy. Yeah,
do a better job than him, but yeah.
Yeah. Or if I'm getting a takeaway on like a Friday night, probably if, let's say I would go Domino's, tandoori hot chicken, bit of jalapenos. I like a bit of spice on a pizza. Don't dislike tuna on pizza as well. That might be quite divisive, but I'll see how he's shaking his head. But
what about pineapple on pizza?
I don't think it's as bad as people make out. Is what I say. I would never order it. It'd never be my first choice, but
I quite like it.
Yeah, I don't think
some people feel very strongly about it, don't they?
Yeah, I think it's like, I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. I'd never choose it, but I wouldn't say no if someone, it depends on who offered me a ham and pineapple. But anyway. And then, if I'm feeling, this will reveal my middle classness. So live in Leeds, Franco Manca do an excellent chorizo pizza, which is like a sourdough base. That's pretty good. So there you go. I could talk about pizza for ages. So Elliot, ideal Sunday or pizza? Which one do you want to get involved with?
Pizza, because I am an absolute colossal foodie, which much to my detriment because I don't do enough exercise to offset it. But for me, anything with meat on it. So pepperoni is very good. Meat feast sort of pizzas has to be tomato based, not barbecue. I'm not getting on board with the barbecue base.
Agree with that.
It's got to be. If we're going if I'm in a restaurant, you want thin and crispy, proper tomato sauce. For me, my missus has barbecue sauce, for example. It's just no, what are you doing? That's not for me. Tuna is an abomination on pizza. You shouldn't do that. Don't do that. Fish should not be on pizza. I actually would say tuna is more disgusting to put on pizza than pineapple. So
have you tried it? Have you tried it?
No, I don't like tuna, so I don't.
Oh well, there you go. If you did like
fish on
tuna,
pizza is not okay, really. Anyway,
do you like it? Have you had anchovies on pizza? Proper?
No, I wouldn't do
that.
No,
you're not an anchovy fan?
No, I'm a bit culinary challenged, I suppose. I'm not a massive seafood person. I do like traditional, obviously, fish and chips and scampi and stuff like that. But I won't put them on a pizza particularly. So I would go. I think pepperoni is absolutely solid. You're never gonna lose any friends over that. And then or a meat feast, something like that would be my pick personally.
I wouldn't put fish and chips on a pizza as well.
No, that probably wouldn't go down well.
No, there will be somewhere that does that. But
I'd give it a go.
I'd give it a go as well.
Yeah.
God, there'll be some Italians, if we have Italian listeners listening to this, kicking off big time.
You get like Donna meat on pizza, can't you?
Oh, you see, you'd rather eat fish and chips than on pizza than chips. I think we need to wrap this pod up. Otherwise, this is going to descend into something else. But yeah, we'll probably leave it there. Elliot's criticising my pizza choices, so we'll see if he gets invited back on next time. Joking, of course. But thanks to Josh and Elliot for coming on, and thanks to everyone who sent in their questions. Enjoyed that. I think we'll do it again. So and we will be back to preview the West Brom game. So stay tuned for that.
There's a team that is dear to its followers. The colours are bright blue and white. They're a team of renown, they're the pride of the town, and the game of football is their delight. And all the while upon the field of play, thousands loudly cheer them on the way. Often you can hear them say, who can beat the town today? And then the bells will ring so merrily, and every goal shall be a memory. So town, play up and bring that cup back to Huddersfield. So town, play up and bring the cup back to Huddersfield.